everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Forum BX257, your friendly neighborhood G.I. Joe toy reviewer. But instead of taking a look at something from the 1980s or the 90s, I'm going to be taking a look at something which was just released, but very much related to those vintage toys. That is Super Impulse's world's smallest G.I. Joes. Now, Super Impulse has made a whole line of world's smallest versions of classic toys. And in fact, before this, they have actually made a world's smallest version of the 12-inch G.I. Joe toy. In that case, it was a representation of the 1970s Adventure Team figure. But here we finally get representations of the G.I. Joe A Real American Hero characters. There's 3 of them so far in the series, each sold separately for now. And this one is Duke, but we also have Roadblock and Snake Eyes, which I'll take a look at later on in this video. So far, these actually popped up at in very late December at Cracker Barrel, which is quite known for these type of novelty-like adult collectibles. But I'm sure places like Target and Toys R Us and eventually Amazon will probably get them at a much cheaper price. And here are all 3 figures in the line so far. I'll take a look at Duke first. Very interesting. The outer package is this really large thing. However, the card that he's actually on actually does serve as storage for the figure if you just want to have him on a card, but not on this huge bulky blister, meant really only for the shelf. One very interesting thing is that on the bottom they've actually have the classic 1984 Duke artwork, but on the card itself it looks like the 2009 Resolute card artwork. I'm not really sure why they went and did that. The other 2 actually do have their matching original artwork on them. And here we have a little catalog thing here, but the main star of this video is, of course, the world's smallest G.I. Joe itself. Now, this is not actually a card, but actually plastic. And the blister is actually acrylic. So this is really meant for display just like this. You can even just stand it up like that, and it stands up perfectly straight. On the back of this, we do have some nice classic G.I. Joe artwork and a little doorway. We just crack that open, and now you have access to, well, I guess the accessories, which seem to be in a bag, as well as a tiny internal blister, which you can pull out, and that will release the figure. Oh my goodness, is this thing ever small? It took me forever just to focus the camera on this tiny figure. But let's see, just how big is he? Well, he is 1 1/4 inches tall, or 3 centimeters tall. That is tiny. I think the scale is around 148, maybe 150. We'll see in just a moment because I have a few things which I'll put him beside just to give you a sense of real scale here. But let's take a look at his accessories as well. In this little bag. So just like it says on the contents list of the card, it does come with a little backpack, a tiny little helmet, a clear stand, which the original figure did not come with. As a matter of fact, I don't think any of the original vintage G.I. Joe figures came with a perfectly clear stand. In fact, this kind of reminds me of the stands which I use, which I bought from smalljoes.com. And his, of course, his little weapon there. I have to say, the sculpt isn't really all that bad. In some photographs I've seen, it looks like the thick paint has kind of washed out some of the sculpting, but it doesn't seem to be so on this figure. However, I will say that there is a little patch of the brown on his knee there, which is rather unfortunate. But I do have to say that the paintwork on his face is exceptional. As a matter of fact, it's better than on some larger scale figures. That's really weird. Now, this figure does have articulation. Yes, even at this really small scale. It's rather unfortunate that the legs aren't articulated, but the arms are. You can sort of raise them up like this, and his head can move. And that's it. That's really all you get. Again, he is not really an action figure as such. He is more of a collectible that you just put on your desk. So let's just put them together. You can actually see he has a peg hole, but only on one foot. So I guess this thing really only goes onto the stand in one way. Well, I had to do that a little bit off screen here, but even though it's a tight fit, the figure is slightly rubbery, so it does have a good amount of give to get into there without cracking or breaking or anything like that. So let's put on his backpack, which I have a bit of a problem with because this is not Duke's backpack. This is 1985 Dusty's backpack. A very strange mix-up here because there is no 1985 Dusty, at least yet released. So I'm not really sure why they went and made that goof, but that seems to be a problem with Super Impulse at times. They mix and match certain things and just call it good. Put his helmet on there, which is very loose, very strange, but then again, the original figure's helmet didn't really fit his head either, so there you go. Yeah, that's not going to fit on very well. Let's see if he can at least hold his weapon. Yeah, actually he can. That's nice. And there he is, fully equipped with his card in the background. And here he is next to the 3 3/4 inch original 1984 Duke. And I will say that this is a really nice representation, despite how incredibly small that figure is. It basically just comes up a little bit over the knee of a 3 3/4 inch figure. That is crazy small. However, even though the helmet doesn't fit, well, the original didn't fit his head either, and the backpack is, well, it ought to look like this and shouldn't have canteens on it. That's clearly the one from 1985 Dusty. You'll notice that the original also came with binoculars, which this figure doesn't come with. And now to take a look at one of my all-time favorite figures, 1984 representation of Roadblock. It's a figure which has almost always been on my top 10 list, really. Roadblock here comes with a lot of parts. The figure itself is kind of curious. He seems to be looking off to the side. He has the whites of his eyes, which were not painted on the original figure. And one thing that I've noticed is that the green camo of his vest actually extends up onto his chest, which is rather unfortunate, but almost every version of the Roadblock from Super Impulse has come like this, so I guess it's just something that you have to live with, or I don't know, if you're good with a kit brush, you might be able to paint that over with his flesh tone. I don't know. I put his stand, backpack, and his helmet on. Just like Duke, his helmet doesn't really secure very well onto his head, but at least it looks better on his head than it does on Duke's. Very interesting that the tripod actually has a hole in it, and his machine gun actually does fit onto the tripod. Unfortunately, the tripod does not connect onto his backpack like it does on the original toy, though. I find his arms actually move a bit more freely than Duke's does, probably because this is just the bare plastic and not painted up like Duke's arms were. And again, here he is next to the 3 3/4 inch original 1984 Roadblock. And yeah, this is just such a great little representation of an already kind of small figure, to be honest. And yeah, it just looks so perfect. And last but not least is Snake Eyes, the 1982 representation of his outfit. And as you can see in the contents list of this card, he comes with a little blister card, which is the plastic packaging, the explosive pack, a weapon, binoculars, and a stand. Wait, binoculars? Since when does Snake Eyes ever come with binoculars? Yeah, these are absolutely the sculpt for Duke's binoculars. I think what happened was somewhere along the line in Super Impulse's bean counters, they went and took a look at this figure and said, well, he doesn't have any paintwork. He only comes with 2 tiny accessories, whereas the other figures come with a lot of paintwork and a lot of accessories. And consumers might get the idea that they're not getting their money's worth out of this figure, not realizing that that's not the point of an adult collectible. Despite the fact that he is black plastic and doesn't come with any paintwork, it also means that his sculpting is actually very sharp, sharper than the other 2. In fact, I really love the details on his little Uzi. Those are very sharp details. They didn't really have to do that, but there it is. And I've just reunited Duke with his missing binoculars. And here he is besides his 3 3/4 inch original 1982 or 1983 Snake Eyes. Again, I hate to say this over and over again, but my goodness, these things are so tiny. I really hope these do well at retail because I'd love to see Super Impulse do even more of these figures. Perhaps at least some bad guys. Cobra Commander, Destro, and maybe a Storm Shadow to complement these 2 would be a really good second series. A number of years ago, Running Press did a small Cobra Hiss Tank kit. I think this was 2014 or so. That's quite a number of years ago. Unfortunately, this was the only G.I. Joe item which Running Press ever did. But there is that Running Press Hiss Tank with the figures totally in scale with it. That's really cool. And there is Duke in the turret, fitting in rather well, despite the fact that his legs don't move. And if you want to go with some old school scale matching, here's the 1983 Hasbro Aviva Diecast vehicles, which again, I kind of looked at them as 1/48 1/50 scale, which is just perfect for these tiny figures. And here they are as compared to their counterparts. There were actually 20 of these micro figures released in late 1988 and 89 in the micro figures collection. As you can see, these are more representations of more classic army men, just solid plastic army men with no articulation and no removable accessories. Obviously isn't the first time we got minifigures as a series of toys. Hasbro has tried to do this twice before. First with the Combat Heroes, which were really overly cartoony. And then later on with the Micro Force, which were these bobble-headed game piece-like characters, which I'll admit they had a lot of really obscure characters which they released in that series, which was really cool, but they didn't really appeal to me. These figures by Super Impulse really do appeal to me, and that's rather unfortunate saying that because they're not really that related to Hasbro other than the license. However, these are perfect for just sitting on your desk at work, and you don't have to worry about them being knocked over. They're not too big, so you can hide them away fairly easily, but they're not really that fragile either. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.